The shadow in the attic. The wind howled outside, rattling the windows of the old, dilapidated house. Inside, the air was thick with dust and silence, except for the occasional creak of the floorboards. Sarah stood at the threshold of the attic door, her hand resting on the cold metal handle. She hesitated, the feeling of dread weighing heavily on her chest. Something in that attic had always unsettled her, even when she was a little girl. Now, as an adult, it felt like the house itself was alive, breathing, waiting. The house had been in her family for generations, passed down from one relative to the next. It sat on the edge of a small, forgotten town, nestled between a dense forest and a crumbling cemetery. No one had lived there for years, but it was Sarah's inheritance after her aunt's mysterious death, an aunt she had never met, but whose stories were filled with eerie tales of strange occurrences and unexplained events. Sarah's parents had always avoided the house, and she too had spent her childhood avoiding it. But the weight of her inheritance couldn't be ignored. With a sense of duty, she had returned to the house, hoping to find answers to the strange things her aunt had written about in her journals. But as the days passed, the house felt more like a tomb than a home. And now, standing before the attic door, Sarah felt as though it was calling to her, urging her to uncover whatever secrets lay within. She took a deep breath and twisted the handle. The door opened with a sharp squeal, and she winced at the sound. Stepping inside, she immediately felt a chill wash over her. The attic was cluttered with old furniture, forgotten boxes, and cobwebs that seemed to have a life of their own. The only source of light was a single bulb hanging from the ceiling, casting long, distorted shadows across the room. The air smelled of decay, a mix of old wood and something faintly metallic. Sarah's eyes scanned the room, searching for anything that might explain the unease she felt. In the far corner, partially hidden beneath a tattered sheet, she spotted a large, old-fashioned trunk. It seemed out of place among the other discarded belongings, as if it had been deliberately left behind. She approached it slowly, her footsteps muffled by the thick layer of dust on the floor. As she reached for the trunk's brass handle, a sudden noise made her freeze. It was faint at first, just a whisper of movement. Then there was another noise, followed by a scraping sound, as if something was shifting in the shadows. Her heart pounded in her chest, and she quickly turned around, her eyes darting around the attic. There was nothing. No one. Just the wind outside and the distant creak of the house settling. But she couldn't shake the feeling that she wasn't alone. Shaking her head, she forced herself to focus. The trunk was the key. Whatever her aunt had left behind in it was surely the answer to the strange happenings in the house. She gripped the handle, the cold metal sending a shiver up her spine, and yanked it open. Inside, instead of the expected mementos or family heirlooms, there was a stack of journals, much like the ones her aunt had written in. But there was something off about them. The pages were yellowed, the ink faded, and the handwriting was erratic, as if someone was writing in a frenzy. Sarah's fingers trembled as she picked up the top journal and opened it. The first entry was dated 10 years ago. The attic has become alive. It whispers to me at night, telling me things I don't understand. It grows darker every day, and I fear what I might find if I go up there again. It moves when I'm not looking. It watches. It waits. Sarah's stomach churned as she read the words. Her aunt had been a paranoid woman, but this was different. The attic wasn't just a place, it was a presence, something malevolent. The further she read, the more frantic the entries became. Her aunt wrote about seeing shadowy figures in the corners of the room, about objects moving on their own, and about the suffocating feeling of being watched. The last entry, however, was the most chilling. I can hear it now in the walls and the floorboards. It's closer. I've locked the door, but it won't stop. I know it won't stop until it has me. Please, someone, help me. The journal dropped from her hands and she stumbled backward, her breath coming in short gasps. She felt a cold hand graze her shoulder and a voice, soft and rasping, whispered in her ear, "Get out." The room seemed to close in around her. She spun around, her heart racing, but there was nothing there, just shadows. stretching unnaturally across the walls. The wind outside howled again, rattling the window panes, and for a moment, Sarah thought she saw a figure standing in the corner of the attic, a tall, thin silhouette with elongated limbs and a featureless face. Her legs felt like jelly, but she forced herself to move. She grabbed the journal and ran for the door, her breath coming in panicked gasps. But as she reached for the handle, it wouldn't budge. The door was stuck, jammed shut. Panic rose in her chest. She pounded on the door, her fists bruising from the force, but the door refused to open. Her pulse thundered in her ears, and she spun around to face the room. The shadows were no longer just dark corners of the attic. They were moving, shifting, twisting in impossible ways. And in the center of the room, standing in the place where the figure had been, was something worse. Something darker. It was a shape, but not a shape. It was as if the darkness itself had taken form. It had no eyes, no face, just a mass of writhing shadows, pulsating like a heartbeat. Its very presence felt suffocating, as if the air was being drained from the room. It reached out toward her, its long, shadowy tendrils stretching, crawling, coming closer with each passing second. Sarah stumbled back, her mind racing. She had to get out. She had to... The shadow lunged. Suddenly, the door burst open, and Sarah fell to the floor in a heap, gasping for breath. Her hands scraped against the rough wood of the stairs as she scrambled to get away from the attic, from the thing that was chasing her. But the thing didn't follow. It stayed behind in the darkness, waiting. She bolted down the stairs, her legs shaking so badly that she could hardly keep her balance. The house felt alive now, as though it was shifting, groaning, breathing with an ancient and malevolent force. She reached the front door, but it too was stuck. The lock refused to turn, the handle cold and unyielding beneath her hand. "Get out!" The whisper returned, louder now, a chorus of voices coming from the walls. Sarah turned and ran into the next room, the shadows chasing her, closing in around her. But as she reached the door to the kitchen, she froze. There, standing in the doorway, was the shadow. The same featureless figure. Its limbs were long, its form twisted, and its eyes, if it had eyes, seemed to pierce through her soul. "Leave," it rasped, its voice like the scratching of nails on a chalkboard. With every ounce of strength, Sarah forced herself to run. She didn't look back as she barreled through the house, her pulse pounding in her ears. She reached the back door, throwing it open, and stumbled out into the night air. She never looked back as she ran through the yard, past the graveyard, into the forest. She didn't stop until the house was far behind her, swallowed by the trees and the darkness. But even now, years later, the whispering still lingers in her mind. And every time she closes her eyes, she sees the shadow, waiting in the darkness, waiting for her to return. The house still stands, abandoned and decaying, but its secret remains hidden, waiting for the next person foolish enough to seek it out.